Hello and welcome back to another episode of Critical Reactions with your host Bryan. We're going to wrap up this week as we usually do with an album review, going through an entire album track by track, exploring each song in isolation and their part of the larger whole. Today we're going to be looking at the group Artrosis with the album In the Flower's Shade. I've been given a ton of context for this. I'm not going to read it all out right now. I might bring some stuff up later. I have personally read through all of it, and I wager there's going to be times when it's important to bring details up, but I don't want to have like a 10-minute intro on this and kind of spoil some of the stuff for y'all too. I will say, though, there are a few things that I think are worth bringing up prior to diving into this. If you're not familiar with Artrosis, or if you are and you're thinking, wait, In the Flower's Shade? I've never heard of that album. They are a Polish group who originally released this album in Polish in 1999 under a title that is in Polish that I'm not going to be able to pronounce. Though the next year they released an English lyric version of it, which doesn't seem to just re-record the vocals in English, but also apparently has some musical differences between them too. It says that there are slight differences between the vocals and musical performances. So I find that to be really interesting. The band name, Artrosis, is sort of a smashing down of the phrase Art of Roses, Artrosis. Interesting little idea there. And I think the last thing that needs to be brought up is that we will be looking at 13 tracks here, but most of them we're going to smash together in groups of 2 because the entire song is designed to be listened to in one run. Every track apparently runs right into the next. So excluding the first track and the final 2 tracks, everything else will be looked at in groups of 2, unless something comes up and I'm like, I can't hold my tongue, we got to discuss what we just listened to. But I have been advised to break things up into groups of 2 tracks. We have 54 minutes of music ahead of us. This is, what is this? Gothic metal with an atmospheric leaning towards heavy and ethereal sounds. So I'm kind of excited about this. Gothic metal has been kind of hit and miss for me, but the atmosphere has always been incredibly solid. This has been a pretty lengthy intro, but some good information nonetheless. Let's kick it with this opening track titled Unreal Story Chapter 1. A little bit of synth in there. So standard 4/4, emphasis on 3. Great. Very cool vocal layering. Ooh. Interesting. They're very tom-like, but the timbre is just a little off to be a tom. All right, we're gonna stop it right there. Technically, part 2 is coming up. First 4 minutes of this, we got a verse, chorus idea. Very straightforward. No bridge in here at all. The guitars are chugging. Just low end sound, hitting the chord, and just cha 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 cha. Not a lot of technical riffage going on. Very straightforward. It's there to provide the weight, the metallic feeling. Everything else pushes away from that, though. It's the lightness of the synth, which to me is such a 90s synth. it just stands out to me as very much of its era. But it sits on the outskirts. It has some ideas that move, but much like the guitars, it really is textural. You get to hear the sound of this instrument. It is drenched in reverb. It takes up so much space. And we have the drums, which throughout most of this track are fairly minimal. At the beginning, we had a pretty straightforward beat, not even an accent, but hits on 1, 2, and 4, and then the accented snare strike on 3. Later on, though, we just got the accent strike on 3, and then the drums kind of dipped out towards the end of the track. We had some pretty straightforward drum beats before we came into the tom transition, taking us into track 2. Those toms sound very interesting, and well, we'll touch on that on a second. I have some info there from the context. I think I would have spent a portion of this analysis trying to figure them out because they are kind of odd, but I'll save it for later because I already know the answer. What stands out across all of this then, I think what makes most of this interesting, because it's not just atmosphere, are the vocals. There is an ethereal quality to them, but it's also present and controlled. Some of the etherealness comes through in the lighter tones. There is some airiness or breathiness to some of the syllables in the way that they're delivered, but frequently also the vocalist will push into something that is more fuller of body, really physical and present. And what I think is really interesting about this is that there's usually a change in pitch too, not a small one, but a large one. There's this part where she almost pushes, I think she does actually push across her vocal break and go from a chest voice to a head voice, and through that goes from ethereal to physical, which is usually the inverse. Your chest voice is usually more grounded and your head voice is usually a bit more airier. I find it really interesting that she inverts that. but there's actually a lot of that movement in here of shifting between the two voices, but instead of just, chest to head, chest, head, and have that space between it, she slides into it and goes across the vocal crack. That happens frequently on this track, and it adds a very specific flavor to that chorus particular. I don't know what it is about it. I think it almost adds an otherworldly element because that sound itself is so infrequently used in modern music. Yodeling uses it, but I wouldn't necessarily say there's been too many yodeling tracks in the top 40s. Metal as a whole doesn't typically use it. Part of that may be that metal is very male dominated, and I don't know, for some reason, culturally, it feels like it would be strange for a male to use the vocal crack yodel sound in a metal song. There's something about it that to me kind of implies a little bit of vulnerability, and metal just really isn't about vulnerability most of the time. So, I don't know. Definitely some interesting biases driven from culture and experience that are housed within this opinion of mine here. Something that might be worth exploring one day. Regardless, it fits here. I think there's something about the atmosphere that allows that slight vulnerability to come through, but it's also the crack into power. As I mentioned, we shift over that vocal crack to hit something more physical rather than ethereal. And it could also be a type of crossing of the veil. Too, Gothic metal always makes me think of supernatural stuff. I don't know why. But afterlife and ghosts and spirits and stuff like that always come to mind with this style of music. And I think that having that element of non-corporeal crossing a gap and then becoming physical on the other side is an interesting idea if that's what they're representing in this track. It is also called Unreal Story, so there's a possibility that this is what they're talking about. If it is, that's gonna be the biggest pat on my back, dude. I have made some wild interpretations for music that came true in the lyrics, but this one feels too hyper specific. If it ends up being what the lyrics about, I don't think I think there's gonna be a few comments that are like, "Are you sure you haven't heard this album before? Did you look the lyrics up previously?" Oh man. But I guess the opposite of that is every time that I interpret music one way and the lyrics are just the complete opposite idea, which I feel happens more frequently than not. Anyways, the vocal line there, it's just, I don't know, it's a very cool moment, and I love that it's included in that chorus. The atmosphere on this, though, when you take everything into account, is interesting. It's not quite as moody as Gothic metal can be. I think when I came into this album, I was expecting something closer to why can't I think of that band? My Dying Bride. And we didn't get that. In fact, we got something very different that almost feels like it leans closer to symphonic metal with a darker atmosphere than Gothic metal entirely. But it could also be that I'm comparing this to a different era of Gothic metal too, or maybe even just a subsection of what Gothic metal can be. I'll be honest, it's not a genre I listen to a lot. But I did find that the synthesizer emulating strings at times and the vocal clarity that almost feels it's borderline operatic. There's a lot of power and projection to it. If nothing else, I would probably describe this as a theatric performance without using microphones. Theater musicians, if you're doing like a musical play or something, you really have to project so that the people in the back seats can still hear you. And that's what this feels like. It's very powerful, incredibly well supported by the air support and the diaphragm, and just projected, dude. And I again, that's not really what I associate with Gothic metal, which tends to be, and I think part of this is because most of the Gothic metal y'all have shown me is male vocalist, but there's always someone with a really deep voice singing sad stuff. And this doesn't really feel sad or moody or brooding, which is another word I tend to associate this genre of music with. This feels angelic at times. There's something spiritual about this, not necessarily religious, but a connection to another plane of existence. But on the other hand, it's also kind of a straightforward track. The emphasis on 3 almost gives it a dancey vibe. I think if we had a snare on 1 and 3 and a bass kick on 2 and 4, very classic dance rhythm, it really would have come across more as a club song than anything else. The synth is very uplifting. The vocals are, how do I think about it? They're kind of unusual for this style of music. But also the super focused guitars of just play the chord over and over and over on a static rhythm. It's very straightforward. There's not a lot of complexity. It's strong atmosphere, but achieved through simple composition. And to me, I think if the vocalist wasn't here, I would be a bit less receptive of it, given its general simplicity. Regardless, though, I can't deny that the atmosphere fits, even if it is dating itself. The entire sound is very 90s overall. I don't think that's deniable. But, you know, this is only the first track. I'm looking at some of the other song length, and oh, they're all kind of in this range. I think our longest song is 5 minutes. So maybe we won't be seeing anything. For some reason, I thought some of these tracks were like 8, 9 minutes long. But it doesn't seem like we'll be seeing anything larger than this. I do hope that we can find tracks that explore something larger that I think would connect with me a little more. As I mentioned, this one doesn't even have a bridge. Verse, chorus, and then drum transition into the next track. It's a straightforward song, but I'm going to try to approach it from that, knowing what this song is. That way I'm not disappointed by what I expected it to be, and I can be appointed. What's the opposite of disappointed? I can relish in what it is attempting to convey and do and accomplish. So let's dive into some lyrics here, see what's going on with them. All right, before we get into the lyrics, I did mention the drums, and I forgot to bring this up, but the drums are completely programmed. I think that's what gives it its specific flavor, particularly with those toms at the end. They don't sound like acoustic toms. They're close, but they're just not perfect. And it's because they are digital. The drums are actually programmed by the keyboardist. The keyboardist plays in another group, Sui Generis Umbra, which we have checked out previously. And in fact, not even a year ago, we had them on the channel. What's even more interesting is that their vocalist was the one who translated or helped translate possibly the Polish to the English for this version of the track. So it's very interesting to see all the way that these two bands kind of interacted with each other. Now, on to the lyrics. These are, well, they're more painterly. I don't think that they tell me much literally, but it's definitely a vibe that they're leaning towards. There also aren't a lot of lyrics here. I remember there being a lot of words in the track though, and there's probably some repetition in there, but the vocalist also does quite a bit of chanting, might be the word for it, making sounds with the mouth, with the voice, but not using words, I'm presuming. We heard quite a bit of this with the vocalist going back and forth with themselves on just these vocalizations. It adds quite a bit of a feeling, again, leaning well into the atmosphere of this track, but doesn't really elevate or explain much of the lyrical side of things. It's all texture, which is cool, but it doesn't help me here. The lyrics, I'm just going to read this whole thing. It's rather short. I'm your flower and shadow. I blossom and fade. Quiet of bliss governs my mouth, which is red. Silver fog surrounds me. You are my night, and she is my shadow of the earth along which I pace. Unreal world, unreal we are, unreal story. I painted pictures with my tears like passing days. Unreal people, unreal events, unreal we are. There's certainly a feeling of connection and possibly lost here. It talks about how other people are celestial elements to them. The night itself could relate to a moon, something that helps guide them, but is also a darkness, that someone else is a shadow of the earth. They also feel that they are a flower and a shadow for someone else, though. That there is a blissfulness that governs their mouth. It could be the way they speak, it could be physical actions, who knows, but they are quite happy. It's interesting, though, that after it says quiet of bliss governs ... my mouth, we have a double hyphen and then red. Am I to read this as the mouth is stained red? It is Gothic metal. Vampirism is not too unfamiliar within this genre, but should that be the direction I take it? We do have a lot of talking about night and shadows. In Unreal World, vampirism is the undead. That would line up a little bit with my spiritual crossing of the veil, but I don't think there's enough here for me to say, yeah, I'm confident in that read. It is still quite vague. And through that, I don't know exactly how to interpret it. Other than that, I get this vibe of connection and loss, of having people in your life that you are so reliant on, and they are reliant on you, that you might as well be shadows of one another, but that there's sorrow here. I painted pictures with my tears like passing days. Sadness that, due to the fact this song is about connection, is probably about a loss of those people in our narrator's life. But that's honestly all I can get out of this. There's just not enough hard information in here on the surface for me to interpret more from. All right, we're going to continue on here looking at Unreal Story Chapter 2 and White Page. Let's kick it. Some sort of bells, something twinkling in the background. Triangle, maybe? And speaking about the wordless vocalizations, you got this 3-3-2 combo. 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2. Those string stabs. So we took the 3-3-2, doubled it. We got 3-3-3-3-2-2. Very interesting focus on just bass and snare. The triangle kind of takes a place of the cymbals in ways. We got a guitar riff here. Technically, I said we were going to run it into the next track, but I have some things I want to bring up here. I'm going to rewind this just a little bit since I feel like the transition into track 2 was a little lost since I didn't do that last time. I pulled it back about 20 seconds, though. We're going to be able to hear that groove and the feedback taking us into track 3 when we dive into that. Now, there is something that I'm picking up on this track. It reminds me a lot of the first, actually. There's two main ideas in here. We have the dun da 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 dun gung ga da da dun gung ga ga dun gum. We have a little bit of rhythmic movement there on the guitars. It's riffier than just playing chords where we have heard in other places. But the other side of this track is the breaking up into the 3-3-2. That shows up a lot in this track, and that is a place where the guitars just lean right into chords exclusively. We do see a mild expansion of that. The 3-3-2, of course, if you add that up, is still 8. We're still looking at 8 half beats, which is 4 full beats, which we're just in 4/4. This entire album so far has been in 4/4. Very traditional time signature right there. But if you double that, you get 2 bars, 8 beats, 16 half beats. So instead of 3-3-2, we do 3-3-3-3-2-2, or 3-3-3-3-4 if you prefer to see it that way. But breaking up into twos, you can see how it is an expansion of the shorter version of it. I think this is pretty cool. We get to introduce some neat groove in this track through that method, and we get to have a bass idea and an expansion, something we didn't really see too much of on the previous track, which was kind of similar, static throughout. Chordal things changed, the atmosphere changed, what instruments were present changed, but we didn't see too much of compositional advancement in that one. So I like seeing that here. We have two distinct ideas, and one of those ideas has a variation of it to create a quasi-third portion to this track. So just on the compositional side, primarily rhythmically, but something related to melody, we get to see some new stuff there, and I'm really appreciating that. It allows this song to feel more diverse through its runtime, where the first one kind of left me wanting more, which was something I stated in the previous analysis segment. We also have expanded instrumentation on this. On that 3-3-2, you have the accent on the ones. 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 1 2 3. Each of those accented beats had a string stinger on it, which was just this digital string sound. I don't even know if I could call it a specific instrument. It was just a string section and these really sharp chordal hits on those. It adds a lot of intensity to the track. Not as much as I think of a real string section would. I've gotten to this conversation many times when it comes to any sort of metal that uses digitized strings. I don't feel like retreading it right here. I understand the logistics of always using live instrumentation when you're touring in your studio. I get it. But I do feel that particularly because it's a very 90s sounding thing, maybe it's also that I'm divorced from this sound too. Maybe in the 90s, I would have absolutely been sold on this sound. Today, I am not. Much like the drums, much like the synth from the first track, a lot of this stands out to me as very clearly not acoustic, not real instrumentation. I don't think that diminishes it objectively. However, subjectively, it's not a taste I'm really enjoying. I suppose I would have liked a different spice here. But it is cool how we are embellishing this guitar riff with this instrumentation. There's also a lot of bass kick and snare focused rhythmic ideas in here. We're just hearing less of ride cymbals, crash cymbals, hi-hats, toms even. It's just bass kick and snare through a lot of this. In their place, though, we have this bell, a triangle possibly, which is giving us the consistent beat. Very rigid, always coming in on every, what other beat was that? Every fourth beat. Something very reliable, though, much like the cymbals would. I found that to be an interesting idea. I can't think of any other metal track I've heard where triangle was used in place of a rhythmic cymbal idea. I don't know that I guess it works. It's just different. So it's kind of tough to know if I enjoy it yet. I will say that the production on it is very shrill, focusing quite a bit on the treble bass of the EQ. And it comes across a little sharp to my ears. It's also very dominant in the mix. These are nothing wrong with the composition, though. It's just the way it's presented to my ears. It's possible a remaster or a remix makes this more palatable to me. And that's another thing too, if this were ever remastered using the original stems for all the instruments, but with modern string sounds or a real string section, and a modern triangle sound, modern drum kit sound, it would be a very different album. I'm not saying it would be objectively better, but I may find the production elements of it to be more to my liking, that I would enjoy the way it's presented on the same level that I'm enjoying the composition. But it is something I'm trying to attune my ears to and enjoy more as we go through, as I'm reminding myself what this album is and trying not to compare it to what it isn't. Aside from that, most of this track feels like we're retreading similar grounds. This is chapter 2 of the first track. It's quite possible that the similarities are intentional in order to create a sonic glue between these two songs, since they are chapter 1 and chapter 2 of the same title. We'll see if they decide to go in different atmospheric or emotional directions in other tracks, but so far there's certainly a homogeny of sound that it works. 50 minutes of this will be very interesting, though. It continues to come across to my ears very I don't think pop is the right word. I've been trying to figure out the best way to talk about this since I don't think I brought it up very well the first time around, but there is something incredibly digestible about this, where to me it still feels like an electronic song that happens to have distorted guitar tones on it, more so than a metal track that is using digital strings and synthesizers and operatic style vocals or operatic leaning vocals. And I find that to be interesting because my mind reads this more palatable, more, again, I don't have the vocabulary for it. It doesn't feel like metal to me though. Metal is abrasive, metal is counterculture, metal, it just rubs the wrong way towards a mainstream listener. This doesn't feel very metallic to me. This feels very digestible. If you had given this to me before I had gone on this whole metal journey, I still think I would have enjoyed it because it doesn't feel like metal. And that is a very interesting thing, for me at least, because I'm still kind of hearing this as club music. Granted, a goth club, sure, 100%. You would not find this in, a typical club. After Miley Cyrus, we're going to play some Artrosis or something like that. But I frequented goth clubs in my youth, so I'm well aware of the types of music that are played within them. You should have seen the way I dressed and the moves that I put down on the dance floor. Maybe you shouldn't have seen them. It's probably better that no one had cameras. Anyway, this type of music I feel like would fit right in, which is heavier leaning on the electronic side. The aggression of the digital guitars is a spice rather than the main course, which metal to me is always a guitar-driven genre. This simply isn't. The guitar helps the atmosphere, helps the flavor, but it's not the main identity of this. It's another thing I'm trying to keep in mind moving forward. Let's hit some lyrics. And here's another track that, despite the heavy use of vocals within it, is actually rather empty lyrically. We have 4 lines. I wade through the dream again, I will stay here for long. I broke the silence with silver drops, I dance among the clouds. Rainbow raises from behind a hill, it unties colors of wishes. Me for you, you for me, eternity for us. Wanting to stay in a dream, that dream dancing among clouds, seeing a rainbow that grants all sorts of wishes, unties the colors of wishes, giving us an eternity together, presumably, is what that final line means. But there is once again the recurrence of silver. Track 1 mentioned a silver fog surrounding the narrator. This one has a silence being broken by silver drops. I'm not sure what to read into that. Silver is not a color that I typically have, forget typically, it's not a color that I have a lot of metaphorical parallels to. Blue, yeah, dude, blue has a lot. Life, water in general. Water can also, it can be life, but it can also be death. Red, fire, anger, rage, but silver? No, that color doesn't mean much to me, not metaphorically. So I'm kind of curious what the narrator is focusing on by bringing it up twice in 2 tracks. We're going to move forward then. This next track we'll listen to alone, called White Page, and then maybe we'll start clumping tracks together. We'll see what's up. kind of like whale sound or maybe sonar, and then just crashing, crumpling. And that's a big drum. That's like a symphonic bass drum. Oh, what? I'm loving this guitar work, man. The little textures from the keyboard. Vocal harmonies too. That 2/4 accent. Cool bass work too. Yeah, great finger picking. There's that 3-3-2 again. Yeah, I think I would have picked up the drums there. The snare is incredibly consistent with its velocity. Interesting transition. Double time with the snare covered and cracks me up, man. This chorus reminds me of a song though, and I don't know what it is. All right. Man, continuous albums are so difficult to do this type of reaction with. All right. Yeah, yeah, I'm enjoying myself here. This I find is more subjectively up my alley than the previous two. I like the larger focus on guitar work, even if it is generally textural. We do have chordal information, particularly pedal tones on the guitar. It tends to change notes when the chord does, except we do have one leading tone in there. Um, but it's also incredibly emotional too. The use of the whammy bar for those really wide bends, probably tied also into a guitar slide, as we do have almost these full octave bends from one pitch down to another. I love it, dude. It's bringing in like a bluesy guitar aesthetic, which works really well with the Gothic sound in general, but not really bringing in blues chordal work and harmonic work. So it's evoking the sound of making the guitar cry without actually bringing in that really bluesy sound. And that's a really great thing to notice here and to bring into this, because it is frequently paired with the vocals. We have a duet between these two. And I love the way that all of that works together, having these two instruments bouncing off of each other melodically and harmonically, and dare I say, even emotionally. The wistfulness in the vocals with the crying out of the guitar is a wonderful combination. But there's even a neat little texture going along this verse. If you listen to the keyboardist, they're doing these little da 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 on this chord, and it's panning from left to right behind these instruments. That's just a great way to keep the energy going while the guitarist isn't doing that. For the past two tracks, the guitar is pretty much the instrument that is playing the most frequently, whether it's eighth notes while playing a chord or something like that. They are rhythmically the instrument that is providing the most momentum. And if they're over here just holding out these long notes and the drums are, well, as minimal as the drums have been this entire album, who's pushing the song forward? The vocals have a little bit of directionality to them, but I wouldn't really call them momentous. So the keyboardist fills that role. I really like that. It allows the song to not feel like it is stagnating in any way, despite the fact that we have shifted to a counterpoint compositional style of two instruments just holding out notes and being emotive about it. Very smart decision there to include that part. But also because the guitar isn't at the bottom of the song as they have been, it opens up space in the EQ for the bass to shine through. And this is an instrument I haven't really talked about much at all this video so far, but I really enjoyed here. There's a beautiful finger picking technique that the bassist is using, while also, I don't know, every once in a while implementing some pop too. String popping, not pop genre. Just so that the bass has bite on specific notes. I thought that was very cool, and while the bassist is still primarily giving harmonic information, uh, mostly sticking around a pedal tone, there's not really melodic riffs coming out of the bass. That's their job, that's their role. Everyone else is off doing things, someone's got to hold the fort down. But it's not just doom 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 doom. Like, it's not just that. There is other elements to it, and there's textural changes too. Like I said, sometimes it's finger picking, sometimes the finger picking's a bit harsher, sometimes I hear a little bit of popping going on in there too. It's diverse, and I will always praise diverse writing, even if it's minimally diverse, because it understands what's necessary for the song. And I'm always down for a composer or a musician. Sometimes these bands, everyone writes their own parts, equal weight as far as the writing process goes. Regardless, understanding what the song needs more than what the musician might want. Some people just want to get up there and show off, and that's cool too, man, but sometimes that hinders the art. And I'm glad that the song is put first on this track. So yeah, we have a lot of really cool things going on here that we haven't heard in other tracks that allows the song to be, to my ears, a little richer, a little more variety being shown. And I don't know if I should use the word stronger writing, but different writing from the previous two tracks. There is, however, the chorus, which I found to be really interesting. When paired with the verse, creates a rather rocky sound overall. I wonder if this is going to be consistent, where I had already mentioned that it doesn't really feel like a metal album. I will say that we do have metallic sounds in this one. The guitars do shift back to chords after the chorus, and then we do the double time on on the drums, which is just that 2/4 backbeat snare accent, man. That cracks me up for some reason. I'm not exactly sure why. But when we get into this moment, the guitars do kind of kick into a more metallic sound in general. And I'd say that overall, yeah, goth metal there. But the verse and the first half of the chorus are very goth rock. Is that a genre? It feels like goth metal, but quite a bit lighter. And I think that that lightness is actually what I'm reading through most of this. This song doesn't have as much of a leaning towards the electronic side of things, so it doesn't feel as club coded as some of the other two tracks have. But I will say that it's rock, not really metal. Still a levity to it, a lightness in general. I enjoy it though, it's fun. When I think of goth metal, I think of heaviness, brooding, negative emotions. I don't really know that I've gotten that so far. The first track lyrically was about loss, sure. The second track, I don't know what it was about. But the second and third tracks here have been very fun. Yeah, I don't end up dancing like this to like doom metal, you know? There's a lightness, a groove to it all, a levity within the sound of everything. That doesn't feel very gothic to me, even though the chord progression is certainly there. I find this to be a really interesting combination in that it has the sonic qualities of, has the harmonic composition of Gothic music, but not necessarily the emotionality of it. I can't wait to see where I land on this once the album is over and how I reconcile these two, because right now I'm having a tough time seeing how they work well together. To me, they feel very disparate. I think as far as their sound goes, it works, but when I try to view it past the subjective element into, this is art. What is this art trying to tell me? I feel that it's just it's at ends with itself. It's trying to say two very different things to me, or at least I'm getting two very different things out of it. And now I'm wondering if maybe this is a product of its time too. This isn't, or this might not be the first time that I've listened to something from the 90s and felt that it was just a hair bit lighter than it was intending to be, only to find out in the comments, y'all are like, nah, dude, in the 90s, this was heavy. Like, this hit. I'm ruined by all of the extreme metal y'all give me. Anything that isn't blackened feels like pop to me these days. It's not fair to me. I'm kidding. But no, it is interesting where what we listen to creates thresholds and boundaries for other things to be compared against. I mean, if you never listened to metal, there's definitely some stuff that would feel really heavy to you, and a metalhead's like, dude, that's just pop music. There's nothing heavy about that, but comparatively to what you're used to, it certainly has weight to it. So those are, biases and experiences that are always going to bleed into the listening experience of something. And that may be what's happening here. I'm curious where other people sit on this. Do you find this to be light and dancey, or is this heavy and moody? Anything else about this track? No, I'm surprised I haven't said much about the emotionality of this. Usually I like to explain this song feels like this, but I think a lot of it is because of what I just spoke about, that generally how I'm enjoying these songs is from a positive viewpoint. Then I hit the lyrics and I listen to some of the chordal ideas. And I'm like, I don't think this is supposed to be happy, but it feels like that. And I'm just clashing real hard on it. I don't know what it's trying to tell me. All right, so far the lyrics have been fairly straightforward. I've had some questions about things, but to me they felt more metaphorical than maybe a translational thing. This is the first time where I'm finding it difficult to understand what it's trying to say. And this was mentioned to me originally, that the translation is a little rough. This is called White Page. I'm interpreting it as blank page. I think that's probably more accurate to what it's trying to state. It says a stone of no value appeared as a diamond. And I'm really curious what this is supposed to imply. Is this a stone that has no value, that was the illusion of a diamond? It looked more, or it looked worth more than it was. Or is this the opposite? A stone of no value appeared as a diamond. That it actually had value, but someone thought it didn't. It looked like a stone of no value. I don't know. It says, although it's always been unbroken, it's gone into a dream long ago. And you're a blank page again. You efface words with rain that bitter, like a wormwood. You will find your breath in unwritten verses when you master their plot. That's a wild line right there. To find what makes you you, to find yourself, your identity, and things that haven't been written once you master their plot, once you've gone through their story. To me, what I get out of this is that you will find yourself through your hardships. They haven't been written yet. You have no idea what your future holds, but as you get through your future and it becomes your written past, you will find who you are. But right now, you're just a blank page. It says you fight with dream and night that is memory's queen. No, once again, we have night coming in here, although less positive as we saw in the first track. This one focuses on the night as an adversary. It says everything is being brought to dust in your inner self, and together with you in the gallery of phantoms and shadows, you still stand alone, with new hour hoping something will let you move. So you feel stuck in your past. You feel stuck within yourself. It really is about needing to take those steps into the future. You need to find the bravery to let go of who you were and find out who you will be. I think, at least. Some of these lines are still a little rough, but I do think that that's what's trying to be said here. And that's pretty cool. That's a positive notion. That's a great message. And that works well with the positivity in this track too. I mean, when you think about this song, it starts out rather minimal. If it is about having the courage to take that leap into your next era of yourself, the song pushing towards that double time feel with the snare on 2 and 4, it's really about trying to leave stagnancy of something that feels slower, of dragging you down into something with tempo, into something with momentum. Maybe even the duality of the vocals and the guitar and the verse is a clashing of who you think you are and who you want to be. Maybe, maybe. I'm not, again, I'm not super confident in any of my reads of this album so far, but that's what it's saying to me. And I actually can tie that into the music, which makes me happy because I don't think I'm too much of a critic. I'm not a great analyzer here if I'm not actually telling you what it's doing with its art, what message it's trying to say. If I just sit up here and say, oh, there's tempo in here and there's instruments, like I'm just describing things. I'm basically a reviewer at that point. I got to earn my keep around here. All right. Next up, we're going to be looking at the fourth track, which is just it's just the male symbol. We'll actually see an instrumental later of the female symbol, so I'm kind of interested in the duality of these two instrumentals. But then we'll check out track 5, and I will, once again, I've rewound this a little bit so that we can have a proper transition in. Let's kick it. Oh, we got vertical bells. Oh, there they are, of course. So it's the first and third time through the pattern? Because there's the piano. Kind of eerie. Bass shining through, man. Yeah. That 2/4 snare, man, and paired with this uplifting music, it's just, it's so bouncy. Those cool electronic sounds in that last section too. See, this actually has a lot of weight, guitar driven, definitely a metal section to this album. The delicateness of the vocals here. Alright, channeling the 80s for a bar. Little electronic textures. Ooh. All right, just got the guitar fade there. All right, yeah, these were really well done. I think the instrumental could have done with less looping. We had like an A and a B section, and we just repeated that again. I would have liked something a little more linear there. But I really liked what it did too. Strong guitar writing, strong bass work, just cool overall ideas. It also felt heavier. I think it did a great job of introducing And I Will, which is probably their heaviest, most metallic song so far on this album. And so kind of ramping up the energy a little bit from White Page into track 5 here and using this as the way to ramp that energy up. That's a really smart decision there, especially since this entire album is supposed to be understood as a whole. If you just have 12 tracks on an album, yeah, you can kind of play around with sound in general. Nothing needs to build into one another. You can have a ballad on track 6 and then your heaviest, gnarliest thing on track 7, and no one's really going to care. But if you're going to combine everything into a single 54-minute work, you're going to want a little bit more smoothness to your movements. And so having this instrumental here, I think, does a fantastic job of introducing this new concept through this writing, which we got to see some of the instruments kind of grow a little bit and expand outside of their roles that they've been performing so far. Focusing more on riffage here, as well as, once again, expanding instrumentation. We have upright bells in the instrumental. So yeah, I thought that was a wonderful bit of pacing within the album. And while I'm not entirely keen on the track itself, it works wonders in context of everything around it. And that takes us to track 5, which, like I mentioned, is the heaviest on the album. It does a great job of expanding ideas. And so did track 3 and track 2 and track 1. I'm starting to notice a pattern here. All of these songs tend to start moodier, lighter, less rhythmically driven, and we increase by stages. Maybe we add in some layers, maybe we change one of the sounds into something a bit more dissonant, or dissonant's not the right word. destructive. We apply some distortion or some compression or some overdrive to an instrument. We give it more bite. We give it a larger size. Maybe we make the drums play more often. Maybe the vocals go from something light and air voice into larger in chest. Something to create an increase of physicality or largeness in size to the vocal delivery. All of these ways are elements of increasing intensity of the track in size, in volume, in scope, in layering, in density, in speed, or at least implied speed. The song does, well, the album does a great job of increasing intensity. I noticed this on track 4 and 5, but 5 in particular does a fantastic job of taking us from that verse into that post-chorus. That entire journey works incredibly well. And after having heard it, and we restarted the idea, went back to another verse, built back out of there, specifically listening for it, yeah, I can confirm 100%. These guys know what they're doing with building intensity. But I have mentioned rough transitions in the past too. And it's dawned on me that every single one is about how to get from the peak back to the bottom to do the rise again. And it's always just quit doing what we're doing and just play the beginning of it again. There's no smooth fade off of instruments to bring us back down. We just kind of stop doing things. I can't say I'm entirely enjoying that element. I think it works, but it's rough. There's better ways that could go about doing that. And I don't even think that thematically it's appropriate. Or at least that is to say, I can't interpret anything out of the lyrical or musical themes that would explain why this is used so frequently. To me, it's the way they just wanted to write it, or the way they felt they had to write it. It's definitely a music first rather than an artistic vision first compositional technique. It works well enough. Metal is known for its harsh transitions, but given how smoothly we rise up, I do find it's a bit of a shame that not once have we come back down in a smooth manner. It's always just, it's kind of clunky, that's all. But I do still want to praise their ability to build up an idea over the course of several segments in an incredibly smooth and connected way. The way that we move from verses to pre-choruses to choruses to post-choruses is impressive. And the fact that they can do this every single time almost. I think we've done it on 4 of the 5 tracks so far. Yeah, they've got a forte for that. And I enjoy listening to it, man. I'll be here all day for these increasing ideas. Aside from that, a lot of this song feels very familiar. We have darker, more aggressive guitar sounds. We've got Dancy 2 and 4 snare accents on the snare. We've got a bass that sounds pretty sick with some cool, slightly moving ideas. And then the vocalist just absolutely carrying this track with their ephemeral vocal work through a lot of this. I still find the vocals to be very impressive in their clarity and delivery. I don't know if this vocalist is classically trained, but I'd put money on it. It definitely sounds like someone who hasn't just fallen into singing. It's not someone who just has, they sung in their car to their favorite songs for years and then they just joined a band. This seems like someone who has been trained to understand how to control diaphragm, how to use air support, how to create volume without using a lot of air. Some of these lines are very lengthy and I don't really find points where it makes sense to really get a breath. So I don't know if she's taking breaths and she's just belting out these notes and these runs for extended periods of time. It's just really impressive. And I do find it to be rather evocative. Creating this, again, almost ethereal sound to everything. There's, I think, a lot of the spiritual component to how I'm understanding a lot of the music comes from that. Because the drums just keep feeling club-like to me. But the guitar work is heavy and brooding. It's the weight. It's the Gothic part of this. It pulls the songs down, or it tries to, and the vocals are constantly trying to uplift them. And I find that contrast to be interesting, especially compared to something like White Page, where they were harmoniously working together to sell an atmosphere. A lot of the rest of this album is them kind of pushing against each other to create this compound feeling of lightness and heaviness, of positivity and optimism versus brooding negativity. It's a very interesting combo to have, and it's defining a lot of this album. Find some lyrics. Here we have a track that is focused on incomplete sentences. Every single line here is followed by an ellipses. Touch me, and I'll fly up over you like rainbow. Take all you want. Let the world spin with the colors of your sounds. Touch me, and I'll unseize glitter closes my eyes again. Brightens up. Let the world spin with the colors of the night. Touch me. Let the world spin. Unseen glitter. Generally speaking, my best guess on this is some sort of personal elation of being with another person. A glittering, not seen by others, but certainly seen by these two. That just being around this person, feeling them, has them soaring over rainbows, seeing the world with the colors of their sounds. But that's not, I don't know. I'm not super confident in that read. It is the only read I have, but I'm not super confident in it. Next up, we're going to check out tracks 6 and 7. Let's dive in. Actually, let me double check this. Yep, let's dive in. Okay, industrial club mix. Yep. And see what I was talking about? Bass on 1 and 3, snare on 2 and 4. It's such a club sound.
Myself to the night. You're king of dreams. You're one with your nation.
Okay. I was just talking about how clean their transitions are, but this track is specifically not doing that for some reason. song is fairly straightforward. We're bringing this idea back from the intro. Got that little rumble in the background. That snare on 3 again. There's definitely a few drum patterns that get reused pretty much across this entire album. Then we get something like this that's a little fresher. The vocal separation is nice here. There's not a lot in the middle to fill that space though. We've forgotten about a lot of the auxiliary instrumentation in these last couple of tracks and have primarily focused on just the metal bands. A lot of guitar-focused ideas recently. Very interesting. We're going to catch the tail end of that solo coming back into this. I feel like that's a bad place to stop, but we've heard 2 tracks here. Got to talk about them a little bit. But I think that is probably one of the smoothest transitions here. I'd probably line that up with Male and I Will, tracks 4 and 5, the ways that they complement each other as far as moving through this album, pulling all of that high, intense energy. I mean, we've got the bass kick snare, boom, ka, boom, ka. We've got this cool heavy metal style solo going on. We had the vocals, the dual vocals coming in prior to that. I mean, we're kind of pushing towards a high intensity moment, and then to just solo, and then bend that, just and you can feel the next track is going to start off pretty heavy, pretty slow. That, I mean, I was even talking about this earlier, that I don't feel a lot of their transitions back down are that great or that memorable, but that's one right there. I really love that idea. Almost as if this high, this feeling of elation is crashing. You know, we have this huge bend into a really low note, but also the idea of coming down from a high. Yeah, I think that's awesome. I'm definitely looking forward to hearing that again. Now, on the other hand, both of these tracks, I think, fit into a very general idea. They have their own flavors of this. I'm not going to say that they're completely identical, but they're both very metal oriented. I think this is interesting because we've kind of been in a metal oriented state so far. Or actually, I should say within this moment. Instrumental, Into, and I Will were both guitar-focused tracks. Track 6, Morpheus, starts off very 90s synth sounding, but once the guitars kick in, it's a metal track through and through, and that took us into track 7, which was also very metal-oriented. I find this to be really interesting, where the first 3 tracks I talked about how strong the auxiliary instrumentation and digital sounds are within the composition, how the guitar work was sort of an afterthought. It was a crunchy guitar tone within electronic music, and I don't think that's true anymore. This segment of 4 songs is very guitar focused. It brings a rather diverse sound to this album, and I kind of hope that we do start heading back towards the expanded soundscape again. I miss the bells and the triangles and all of the other sounds on this. Here we just have guitars and the occasional string. So it definitely feels like we've reduced the complexity and the diversity within that realm. However, we're exploring new ideas too. Being more guitar driven means that we're looking at riffs, stuff that we didn't necessarily have too much of at the beginning. And this is, once again, I think, just leaning towards this idea of artistic intention, where it's not about the musicians. Sometimes the guitars are just going to play foundation, and the rest of the instrumentation is going to be the lead. And other times we won't need those. The song won't call for them. We will return to just guitar focused stuff. Now, I will say that the division isn't super balanced. We're looking at like a 30-60 split on it. So I kind of have a feeling that maybe the album kicked off more instrumentally, more expanded instrumental, and that we've shifted towards a more pure metal sound that's going to dominate the rest of this album. But nonetheless, I quite enjoyed where we started and where we are now, and hearing the transition between those. Now, with that said, both of these tracks do continue on with this idea that I feel the music is quite a bit lighter than the heaviness of the vocals, and more frequently also the chordal elements at play. A lot of this track feels like it's still supposed to be some sort of weight on a narrator's mind. And I think the slowness of the vocal delivery absolutely sells that. There's also, I feel in these two tracks, a little bit more of a fragility to the vocal delivery. There is more time spent in the lighter, airier sounds than the projected physical sounds. It almost feels as if we are within the vocalist's mind throughout these moments, and it's less a description of exterior elements and more a description of interior, emotional turmoil and stuff like that. But the music is bouncier and dancier than ever. Both of these tracks have focused and featured, and I think even track 5 had some of this. The bass kick on 1 and 3, the snare on 2 and 4, and just a cymbal sound on every single hit, and it's just very fun and dancey. You got some sort of some sort of guitar sound that's just chomping away at these guitar chords. And the vocals come in, and there's a lightness, a levity to them because it's supposed to be more fragile, but that levity just kind of soars things upward. Any sort of weight or negativity is gone. This is dancing the pain away in like a Gothic industrial club sound. And, it works. It's just not really what I was expecting, which... it's creating for, as I've said, I feel too many times today, an interesting listening experience for me. And I'm still having a tough time shedding my expectations despite hearing what I have heard. And I feel like it's because this album continues to sort of allude to, hey, sometimes we are more traditionally goth metal, but then they will do something like this and move even further into like an industrial goth nightclub vibe that it continues to throw me off because I'm still not sure what the album is trying to tell me. It still feels at ends with itself or at odds with itself. And maybe that's just it. Maybe it is dancing through the pain. We sing about loss, but we have fun, bouncy music to go with it. Maybe that's all that they're trying to do here. But I am glad to have had pretty much a full-on dance metal track here on track 6. 7 was a bit heavier at times. And there were some ideas of trying to merge the brighter sections with the heavier ones, the more filled out sections with the more minimalistic ones, trying to cross those gaps a little more neatly, but it still kind of came off a bit disjointed to me. And particularly with, I believe it was track 6, kind of bouncing between, it was track 7, bouncing between the extremes rather rapidly. The first minute of this track had 3 completely distinct, nothing to tie them together ideas. We had the first one, then we dropped the energy even more, then we like shot up way high, and it just rapid fire with these awkward breaks between them, like a 1-bar break. So, I don't know, there's still a lot of it that feels rough around the edges. I'm starting to get their vibe. I think the back half of this album is going to treat me a little nicer. But as far as artistic intentions and understanding, I don't feel that I get this any more than I did when I was first exposed to this in the opening track. Lyrically, Morpheus is quite empty. There is one line at the beginning that is spoken word, and then 3 lines after that, I believe, are sung. And it directly references who Morpheus is, the Greek god of dreams and sleeping. It says, "While I didn't beckon you, you closed my eyes. In the depth of your embrace, wearing scent of candles, I gave myself to the night." That's the spoken word part. Then it says, "You are the king of dreams. You are one with your nation. You lost again. Curtain of your theater drops. Scene is on fire, and I wash a dream away. Dance of purple dwarves is over. Night losses, or maybe loses with day, and I wash a dream away." The only thing I can get out of this is that Our protagonist didn't want to go to sleep. Morpheus put her to sleep. Maybe that's the line, I didn't beckon you, but you closed my eyes. And then the fact that says you lost is that the narrator woke up. The theater curtain drops, everything is on fire, and I wash a dream away. Maybe that's all it's about. You tried to, bring me into your dream world, but I escaped. Maybe. There's not a lot to go on here. I'm curious what other people's interpretation is of this one. Here we have In Among Flowers and Shadows, another track that features a loneliness from not being with someone. The title also is reminiscent of a line from the first track, I'm your flower and shadow. I blossom and fade. So here we have Among Flowers and Shadows. It says, I find myself inside you, though I know we have different blood. This is not the same. I feel dread. I drift in loneliness, wind blows far between. I scarcely catch up with waves, whose shape I close in my hand. Take and hide me, because I exist only for you, among the flowers and shadows, among the vapors wrapping thoughts. My garden will disappear and everything will start again. From untouched sorrow, silence covers with tears. I'm taken in by its scream. I return to the past, and there the line isn't finished. I believe this is where the guitar solo picks up at the end of the track, alongside some vocalization. Generally speaking, though, I get the idea that this person wants to be with someone else and finds happiness when they are, but also finds himself distanced from them more often than not. But it could also be a dream as well, an untouched sorrow, being taken in by the screams and returning to the past, a memory unlocked by a sound, possibly. I don't know. I also have to wonder at this point, there's certainly some thematic overlap between these tracks, but given that the music is continuous, is this a concept album? Am I supposed to be understanding these tracks as a larger narrative? There's certainly albums that we've listened to in the past where I listen to or I read the lyrics and I just immediately begin to interpret them as a concept album, even if the music isn't conceptual. Even if there isn't carryover between songs, the lyrical themes, the lyrical story puts me in that mindset. And I've been wrong at times too, trying to read everything from a single perspective where maybe it shouldn't have been. But this is the opposite. Musically, I get the feeling this is a concept album, but none of the lyrics have ever put me into that mindset. In fact, it's only just now that I've forced myself to think, hey, wait, should I even be reading this as a full narrative? I don't know. I find it really interesting that as dominant as the vocals are in the music, as much as I feel that they are the core element of this album, the lyrics are just fine. Part of that may be the translation of it, being that there is some friction there since English isn't their first language and they actually had to find someone else to even translate it. I wonder if I understood, was it Polish, I believe? I don't remember. Yep. If I understood Polish and listened to the original version of it, would I understand the story any better? Or is it even designed to be understood as a larger work? If anyone has more insight into this, whether they have their own interpretation of this album, or maybe there's interviews from the band to give some authorial intent to it, I'm keen on hearing any of that. I'd love to know if there is something larger at play here that I'm just missing for one reason or another. We are going to continue this journey into the next track, which is an instrumental. I take that back. It's not. It's called The Following Chapter. That is followed by the instrumental. That's just the female symbol. That's going to contrast track 4, was it? Which was the male symbol instrumental. Let's see what's going on here between these two tracks. Got that hi-hat going again. Kind of pulling back to an 80s sound here. Going to assume that was on my end, not on theirs. Got those string stingers back. One, two, three, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. They like that rhythm. But I've mentioned that a lot of the drum patterns tend to pop up on other tracks too. What instrument is that? Is it like a violin run through like a light bit of overdrive? First thing I noticed is that it's kind of eerie. Quite a bit different from the immediately jumping into the full sound on the other instrumental. This one's taking its time. Also melodically driven. That fun little gallop there. Okay. Alright, that's pulling us into the next track there. I don't have a lot to say about the following. The following chapter, track 8, it's retreading a lot of old ground there. We got some nice guitar riffs, we got some cool bass work, we got some straightforward drum patterns, and the vocals are really pulling through with it. It is nice to have the strings in more stuff. I'd still like to hear some of the expanded ideas, but all of this I feel like I've repeated in the past 2 analysis segments. So that's just another solid track on the album that I don't have much to say new about. But this instrumental, this was nice. First of all, we entered into a new atmosphere. It is creepy. It is eerie. There's something about it that makes me think I should not be here. That's a fresh sound for this, but it's also a bit different. A lot of this album has been digestible. Digestible is not the word. Inviting might be the right word. As long as you can get past the gloominess that Gothic music tends to showcase, it's a fairly easy to listen to album. A lot of that, I think, comes through the synth and drum work, but the vocals also help too. The vocals are just incredibly gorgeous, and I think even if you don't listen to Gothic music, you'll still be able to enjoy at least that part of this album. This track, though, it is still a very safe type of danger, sure, but there's something eerie, something spooky about this track that we just haven't seen elsewhere, and we haven't really felt anything like this that wasn't balanced out against that. As I had mentioned, there are parts of this album that are heavy, they're dreary, they push a weight down, but they're always contrasted by the vocal timbre, by instrumental timbres, by drum patterns, something to bring levity to a heaviness. We don't really get any of that on this track. In fact, when we push into the heavier sections of this song, away from that eerier opening, the heavy sections are just that. There is a 2/4 backbeat on the drums, which is just super consistent on this album, and it provides a little bit of levity simply because of the high treble drum production. But it's not really enough to bring it up, to lift it out of this weight. The vocals have consistently done that alongside the rare guitar line that pushes upward. Without the vocals here, we're just stuck at the bottom. It has a heavy implication to it. But there's another part to this track that I think really stands out to me. The guitar solos. I loved these. There is so much emotive storytelling going on in these that I haven't really felt elsewhere. It could be that I just missed it, or maybe it blended into the general metal sound, which I've always had a tough time hearing emotion in metal. It's just a very neutral, aggressive tone, sure, but I mean, it's really made up of usually 2 to 3 note chords. They're just not well rounded enough to get a lot of information out. We're looking at dyads, power chords, root, fifth, and octave, which is just the root, or we're looking at triads, usually the same intervals across all the chords, which you just don't have a lot of harmonic information from that perspective. So we finally get some strong writing here, though, that speaks to me. Or maybe I can interpret it however you want to view that. There is so much longing in this track, particularly because of the solos. I don't think I really get it elsewhere when the soloist isn't playing. It's just more of the same metal stuff. But when the solo kicks in, I can just feel this sorrow, this pain for wanting of something more, of something else, and not being able to obtain it. Now, the lyrics so far and a few tracks have lined up with this pretty well, so I feel pretty confident in my reading of that. But I do love not just the tone of this instrument, but the melody, the linearity of the melody, when they choose to move quicker through ideas, when they choose to slow it down, the bends that they use, all of it is just gorgeous. And it's been a while since I've complimented the guitar work like this. I think it was not page 3. track 3, White Page, which had that duet between the vocalist and the guitars. We really haven't seen much like that. We've had more vocal layering since there, but the guitars have always been this background thing, either a rule of cool riff going on or just texture, playing chords. It kind of upsets me a little bit that the guitarist is this great at conveying emotion through linear melody. We've heard it twice now, maybe 3 times, and I just feel like it's heavily underused within this album. There's so many places that I feel like the guitar would do wonders pulling into this more melodic writing with or without the vocalist across this album. And there's been actually, it was track 8, the one we just listened to, the following chapter, where we had like, I don't know, solid 16 bars in the bridge of just the guitars chugging and the drums drumming and maybe a synth thing going on for texture. No melody at all. Why didn't we have a cool guitar line there to evoke whatever emotion they were trying to pull out of it? I mean, I guess from the rule of cool perspective, there was a nice little build-up in there to push into the next big section with the vocalist. And sometimes it's just cool to have some chugging guitars. Yeah, I get it, I guess. I'm not a big metalhead, so that kind of stuff, it's rare for me to really enjoy stuff like that. Much like a breakdown in punkier music, I very rarely get those moments. I tend to like more nuance to my writing, I suppose. But man, dude, the guitarist comes out here swinging, and it just really makes me wish we had heard more of this type of guitar writing elsewhere. It's gorgeous, it's emotive, it's evocative, it elevates the music. I've connected to this track in a way that I don't think I've connected to any of them so far. I do find it interesting too. This one is titled Female, whereas the other instrumental was Male. Track 4's instrumental was pretty much energy from the get-go. We started out really high, we stuck really high, we drove through that whole thing. I had mentioned that it kind of started us off with a rocky idea, and then we pushed into a metal idea, and it helped us, it helped the pacing of the album move into the very metallic track 5. This started soft, started eerie, a sound we haven't really heard elsewhere. We occasionally kick it up a notch, but we frequently bring the energy back down. There's a smaller nature to this one. There's also a more emotive nature to this track too. And I wonder if they're trying to convey anything through this. It is a bit gender normative, I would say, but track 4 is aggressive. It is called Male. This one is more delicate. It is called Female. Might be coincidence. Seems pretty on the nose, though. But I am kind of missing this emotional element elsewhere, and I think it is interesting, if nothing else, that it is in the track titled Female. I hope that much like Male did, leading us into the sound for what would dominate a few tracks, this is going to introduce us to a sound that's going to dominate the outro of this album. I'm not crossing, well, I am crossing my fingers on it. I'm not putting my hopes too high, though. This has been a metal album fairly through and through. I expect it to finish as a metal album, but it would be pretty cool we could take a moment and hit some introspective tones in here that kind of shift away from the danceability that we've been exploring, the dancey metal sounds, and find something a bit more emotionally evocative. Though it is 90s Gothic, so I think that dancey element's just going to stick through, man. It's just of the time, I think. This is interesting because it's the second or third time this sentiment has popped up of writing things. This is called The Following Chapter. The final lines of this track are, I'm walking away with each new moment, swimming in bursting stream of words. I want to write the following chapter. We also had White Page, which was all about being a blank page, of using the metaphor of an empty canvas to create the feeling of infinite potential. Oh, you know what? I think it wasn't writing though. It was painting in track 2. Track 1 maybe, using your tears to paint a picture. Still though, this creation metaphor, artistic creation. This one though is writing, which has appeared elsewhere. Now, aside from this final feeling of kind of getting over writer's block and using that as a metaphor for having optimism for the future, I'm not sure about the rest of this. It says truth and deceit turned into words, whose sense is understood only by me. My game is over, quietly the guilt is off. I close fire under my eyelids and I'll start to write the following chapter. I don't know. I'm trying to piece it together to other tracks, and I've got nothing in isolation or within the larger picture other than the final line talking about this renewed sense of growth. And then after this, we have track 9, which is the most in touch emotionally that we've seen this album be. I wonder if the two are supposed to be understood together then. Most of this album has been about this overbearing weight, this grief, this despair, this sorrow. We've had a few tracks of feeling betrayed, of not being with the people you want to be with, of just not living the life you would want to have lived. The following chapter is about finding purpose again. And then chapter 9 is emotional vulnerability in a way we haven't really heard previously. I really hope this continues on. It would lean into this idea that our narrator has found some sort of hope and is being more today than they were yesterday. I have an uneasy feeling though, moving into this next track. Let's dive into this. I'm going to back it up a couple of seconds and see where we're going with the track 2 ways. That little slide upwards, lots of energy. Yeah, okay. chord shaping, something else we haven't really had at all. Yeah, as usual, verse to chorus, the post-chorus is pretty good, but pulling us back to the beginning of the loop is a little awkward. Very interesting triple voice step here too. So the same chords we heard. What was it, the instrumental last time? Maybe it was the beginning of this track. Starting to feel a little doomy here. Very like stomping of the ground, heavy weights. The vocals underneath the main. What a wild sound. A very spring-like keyboard. Heavy reverb on the vocals. Very upbeat drum part. Same chord progression. That's fun. All right. Yeah, two very neat tracks right here. I still think the vocal work is the main draw. There still hasn't really been any riffs that I would find memorable or hummable up to this point. We had a couple of solos, which I think are phenomenally written, but rarely used on the album. In fact, we didn't have a solo on either of these two tracks. The bass tone, the general production of everything in here, the way the drums sound, the way the vocals sound, it's all great. I do find myself wishing the keyboard were brought up in the mix just a little bit. Something that I've noticed on these two tracks, and I'm kind of remembering on other tracks too, is that they are faint. I can key into them when I want, but when I think about previous tracks, it's really just the metal band that I remember about them, unless it's a very distinct sound, such as that springy keyboard sound that was a transition thing in the last track we listened to. That stands out to me. But when the metal band comes in, I kind of forget that it's there, but I promise you it's still in there, just way underneath all the guitar work that's going on. But yeah, the production on all of this is really great, which, first of all, this is a 90s album, so that's kind of interesting in and of itself. I also don't know if this was self-produced. I don't know what kind of budget they had for it, but it sounds really crisp and clear. And this is a YouTube uploaded video, so I don't even know what kind of compression is on it, nor what the original source was even like. It's quite possible that the CD sounds even better. There's well, let me rephrase that. Despite the fact that this is probably not the best way to listen to it, it is still incredibly clear. They did something right when it came to the production, that despite any of the incidents where quality or clarity would be lost in the process that it came to me, it still overcomes that, which means the source was really well done. So the production is just stunning on this. And of course, the atmosphere. Once again, these are moody tracks. They still kind of come off a little too dancey for me. I thought about this last track when it was started to get a little heavier, but it's still like that 2 and 4 snare hit. And I was like, dang, maybe this is why you don't let the keyboardist be your drum programmer. No, it's a joke, but it does make me wonder if the keyboardist had listened to a lot of metal up to this point, or I guess, conversely, I haven't listened to a lot of 90s Gothic rock and metal, so maybe I just don't understand the conventions of the genre. But that is the point that I find is just, it's weirdly out of place, and a lot of the keyboard ideas aren't really metallic either. And I wonder how much of this keyboardist's influences come from the electronic world. Maybe not even necessarily dancing club electronic music, but just electronic in general. And they injected that flavor into this, which is very cool. I don't want to diminish that. I'm all about smashing genres together. But I think that there's got to be subjectively, there has to be a cohesion. There has to be a reason you would smash these sounds together. This is cool, just from a purely casual side, but artistically, I do feel that they're still clashing. None of the lyrics we've explored so far feel like they're designed to be danced to, and yet every single one of these songs, they have me just kind of like bopping my head side to side. They're all jams, dude. I love listening to this. It's just artistically, there's friction there, and I don't think the music is telling me exactly what the artistry is trying to tell me. But here I am, uh, saying things that I've already said before. There is one thing I want to bring up that is new. Both of these tracks focused on triple vocal work. I am a huge fan of this. First of all, the previous track, Two Ways, this felt the most gothic to me because the vocalist stopped singing in a bit higher register and kind of dropped to what is probably a more comfortable chest voice, maybe something closer to speaking. Maybe dropped even just a little lower than that, just to get a little more depth and width out of it, much like a gothic, a male vocalist might drop down to this to do their vocals in order just to get that gothy sound to it. And here we have two lines harmonized, a little different in pitch, but both on the lower end. I think these are the lowest pitches we have heard the vocalist sing all album. That really is the little bit of sauce I needed to really solidify this as gothic music. I just associate that dropping of the larynx so much with this genre. And at that point, everything else clicked. I was like, oh yeah, dude, 100%. But what was neat was there was a quiet third voice in the center that was about an octave higher than our right pan voice, which was the lowest of the stack. And it provided this little sound. It wasn't as loud as the other two, but it was still part of this triad. I thought that was very cool because the middle, we've seen plenty of sections on this album where the vocal starts in the center, isolated, single voice, and then splits out to the sides, and it always leaves the middle empty. I want the bass to do something cool. I want constant drum fills, more melodic drumming. I want the guitar to solo. Please give me more guitar work on this album. It's something to fill this space, and it doesn't. It makes these songs feel a bit empty, but having that here as small in the mix as it is, it works. It's that little bit of extra oomph that's needed there in the middle while also increasing all of this, the texture of this vocal stack and also the harmonic quality of this vocal stack. It's doing triple work and it's such a small addition to it. And I think that I wish we had seen more of that. Not necessarily having a higher octave part, but just something else in these tracks to help fill that in. But we also had sections with multiple vocal lines in here going simultaneously, and I am never going to turn that down. This vocalist is incredibly talented, and I love when they decide to take that route. And I wish, once again, I wish there was more of it. But I suppose more is not always better. Having something to look forward to is nice as well, and there were certainly parts of this album where, well, like this track 11 here, where I'm just thinking, yep, this was nice. Glad we're getting this. I love it. And maybe it wouldn't hit the same way if I just expect it in every song. But we have another track that's chugging metal guitar work, though I will say that this was a bit doomier, this 11th track here, than anything else that we've heard so far, which I'm kind of hoping the lyrics lean into because it's also the least dancey track, at least through that moment. It contrasts pretty heavy as we get into a faster driven section, but we do come back to this slower, doomier, just like stomping feeling that's, yeah, very cool contrast for this album and a nice way to kind of wrap things up. You may have noticed that unlike every single other track where I've kind of had to pause it in the middle of something that's been going on, we have silence here. There is 90-ish seconds, I believe, on the album of Silence here before we head into a hidden track of sorts. That 90 seconds has been cut out. We don't have to worry about it. We're just going to dive straight into it. I've been told that it's not a bonus track, though. It's a hidden track that completes the song. Or, sorry, completes the album thematically and musically. That the band doesn't consider it supplementary, but necessary. The silence maybe is part of their vision, but it seems that most well, I was going to say most, I've really only checked out this one. They cut the silence out though. And YouTube's the only place that this album seems to be available. So that's the way we got to go. Unless I just want to sit here in 90 seconds of silence before I hit play. I don't know if you all want to go that route. Before we get into that though, we got to check out some lyrics. Two Ways is an interesting title for this track, which seems to be someone, maybe the narrator, maybe a different perspective entirely, talking about how someone else has gone astray. It says, your town is ill. You are the only one who lives there. It's alive but empty. Imagination and dreams are ragged. It says, you believed too hard. Listened to the words without emotion. You have different orders from the heart and mind. Feelings are in the heart, but the mind lacks for common sense. Being fed on illusion, you took notice only of what says. Your soul, your master, your God. You gave yourself to him, all of yourself. Possessed by your angel, you pace profoundly downwards. You chose that way along the stony route of red water. It's very accusatory. A lot of this album has been, I miss someone or I love being around someone. And this one says that that obsession has led you down a dark path. I am a bit more convinced this is a concept album, but I'm having trouble still seeing the threads of all of this. Maybe it's just because it doesn't tell a linear story as much as it tells a series of vignettes, and then we get this accusatory line here. Now from here we go into We. I had mentioned that this track ends, the only one that wraps up, and that from here we're going to move into an instrumental track that takes place after some time. This one says, from the forgotten tree, our love is the fruit, sweet, secret, like honey. Secret's an interesting word there. Motionless rock, bird in flight, silent ocean. Imagination of deformed circles sucks the all-truth dry. I don't know what's right and wrong. Fire on a pile of lust. I find this really interesting because it speaks about chaos. Someone who has lost their way, doesn't know up from down anymore. This isn't order. And yet, despite that, we have motionless rocks, birds in flight, forgotten trees, silent oceans, all stillness. In a sense, bird in flight, I assume, is, just wings out, just kind of hovering on the air, not necessarily the flapping part, but everything else is about a stillness. Even the forgotten tree would be something that is no longer present in people's minds. At least with memory, there's a motion to it, a motion through time, if nothing else. So that our love is the fruit of a forgotten tree. Through all of that motionlessness. I don't know. I'm a bit lost on that one. Other than, what I pulled out of it is just general chaos, not knowing where you are. And I think that pulls off of the last track rather well, as our narrator has been accused of losing their way. And here is the narrator saying, I've lost my way. At least that's how I read those two. This next one is called Djembe. Dive into it, see what's going on there. immaculate pitch control on the vocals. Well, I don't think there's a lot to add on to this one. It is what it is. It's calming, it's relaxing, it's vocal led. There is a bass guitar in here, which gives us our lower end and some sort of hand drum, giving us our percussion, which is a huge change from the drums that we've heard, the drum kit that we've heard throughout this album. This is lighter, smaller. I think it fits well within this. The bass is just giving us mostly pedal tone, though, a little bit of leading tones as we move between one to the other. Mostly harmonic information, though. The vocals, though, as usual, is what stands out. We have vocals on the outside. They're just oohs, I think. Maybe, no, they're oohs. We get harmonized on that. They start quiet and then rise up and then come back down. And that's how we kind of move through the chords, is with these dyads from these vocal parts. And then we have the lead melody part that, as far as I can tell, isn't words. This is labeled as an instrumental. I'm going to continue to assume that's true, that they're just making vocalizations here. I will say, though, that the vocalist has a ton of pitch control on this one. There's these really quick little trills between one step and the next step up in the key. Hitting the one, going up, coming back down, and then dropping again really quickly. And those sorts of dexterous movements are placed all throughout this melodic writing, but there's also a general clarity to the vocals as well. There's not a lot of pitch jumping that we have heard. We don't really shift from head to chest. We kind of stay in one specific sound, one specific pitch range. It's a very comfortable sound overall. But unlike the rest of this track, which has been focused on heaviness of sound, heaviness of harmony, heaviness of emotion, this one feels freeing. It has a light harmonic structure, a very light and dexterous melody, and very light and thin percussion. Everything about it feels expansive, like floating away. A little firefly just dipping off into the sky. And I love that. Assuming that this track was about someone who devoted their life to someone they shouldn't have, ended up losing their way, this is, I don't know, redemption, possibly? We talked about a place earlier, I think it was the following chapter, of the narrator realizing that they're not really going where they wish they were and wanted to write a better next chapter, to be a better person next. They want to change. They want to grow and evolve as a human. That's kind of what I get out of these two tracks, We and then Djembe. And understanding that the old way wasn't working and I've got to make a change. Now, I must have misread something or misunderstood something. I thought that we into Djembe was where the silence was, the 90 seconds that created what do they call it? A hidden track more so than a bonus track. But there's actually one more track in this YouTube video here. It's called Omamiony. Omamiony. I don't know where the emphasis goes in that. It's only 4 minutes long. Let's just do it, just in case this was the hidden track here and not Djembe. I don't know. Let's kick it though and see what's going on here. Once again, we have a bit of a levity here, though. Let's have a sort of eerie leading. That might just be the Gothic inspiration, though. There's that 332 again. I'm tempted just to dive straight into the lyrics because aside from an eeriness that we really haven't heard since the female instrumental, track 9, this just feels like most of the other tracks. There is a levity to parts of it that kind of feels informed by a little bit of what we heard in We, but if my interpretation of Djembe is correct, I don't know what this music is trying to say from there because a lot of this is chugging guitar riffs. It feels like we've returned back to the negativity that it felt like we were moving away from. Two Ways was someone telling the narrator, hey, your life is not the way you should want it to be. And then track 11 was, oh yeah, you're right, I should do something else. And track 12 was that something else. To return to form is a bold choice. But aside from that, I also find the writing on this to simply return back to some of the more simplistic ideas we saw on the opening handful of tracks, rather than the more developed writing we saw around instrumental and Two Ways, the female instrumental in Two Ways, where we saw more diverse guitar writing, where we saw counterpoint, where we saw three-way melodies. This is back to very standard, almost goth club sound once again. And it feels awkward. This entire this entire album has evolved from start to finish. And now we're back where we started, which can only imply that our narrator is repeating a cycle, unfortunately. Maybe they took that step forward into the future on Djembe and found themselves falling for another person, spiraling down once again in this final track. If so, genius songwriting. But I suppose we have to get into the lyrics to find that out. Once again, I invite anyone who has more insight into this to point me in some direction, whether it's your own interpretation or some sort of authorial intent through interview or biography or insert, a vinyl insert or the pamphlet in a CD case or something. I'm intrigued but lost. This track, the reason why I didn't know what this word is because it's Polish. It translates to deceived. And the lyrics are certainly about deception. It says, your love is now imprisoned in an old cage in the pouring rain. The heart of gold that you laid at her feet broke before you realized it. She will destroy you with every step, with every gesture, with every word. But enchanted by her melody, you'll drink in the sounds. Deceived by ignorance, you tempt fate. From joy to suffering, a short path, you will overcome it yourself, even though you know the ending. This feels wildly out of left field given what I thought I was interpreting the story to be. But it's quite possible that, as we have explored dreams and shadows, deception and lies have sort of been an element of this album at large. Maybe the previous two tracks were deception. We, the audience, thought one thing was happening, but something else was. Regardless, this person has found that their love for someone else has been their downfall, which has been shown many times. But I suppose at this point, they're like, well, if you don't get it, let's just lay it out clearly for you. You don't get any more straightforward than some of these lines. Now, granted, this is translated by machine learning, so it's possible that some of this is not totally accurate or maybe poetically accurate, but I think the gist of it comes through very clearly. unless some of this is just completely incorrectly translated. Every line seems to push forward this idea of someone being taken advantage of because of the way they feel for someone else. And it talks about how quickly joy can become suffering, deception by ignorance. And yeah, I guess this song kind of fits that. It's a heavy track, especially after the last two. But I still feel like I'm missing something. I thought I was finally starting to understand what this album was doing, and I would never have anticipated this. And even having heard everything, gone through all the lyrics, know what happened, it still feels odd to end the album this way. It's quite possible none of this is a concept album at all. But I did start to see some threads, and I pulled at them and found some connected ideas. It feels like a concept album, but again, it really wasn't until the end of the album I started to see that. So maybe this track has nothing to do with the other ones. Maybe it's just this theme of giving oneself up to another, and we've seen a lot of the perspective of wanting things to be better, and now we have the perspective, maybe a reality of things where typically it goes wrong for the person who's most vulnerable. These are my thoughts, though, on Artrosis's In the Flower's Shade. What did you think of this album? Do you have anything that you'd like to add on to what I said or correct me on? Do you have your own take, perspective, or opinion on this? I'm fairly lost about a lot of what went on in here. If you'd like to add on to any of that, answer questions, give context, or whatever, please put that as well into the comment section below. Above that, in the description box, y'all know how it works. Link to Linktree, got my stuff, music, Discord server, ways to request albums and songs and all sorts of stuff. Like, subscribe, ring the bell. That's above the description box. I appreciate all three. I'll be back tomorrow, 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, 3 p.m. UTC. We're going to do a live stream, 2.5 hours of just laid back music discovery, chill conversation. It is a blast. If you can make it, I suggest you do. Otherwise, those always get uploaded on YouTube. The streams are at twitch.tv/criticalcomposer. That is different from Critical Reactions. That's a different channel. They got that name before I did. So that's not me. You won't find the streams there. I chuckle, but I think a couple of people have run into that issue. I tried to get Critical Reactions everywhere, but someone beat me to it on Twitch. Anyways, those are my thoughts. Until next time, remember to be critical, not cynical of the music you listen to, and have a fantastic morning, afternoon, or evening, whenever you choose to watch my videos.